The clip aired just before midnight. Tucker Carlson leaned forward in his chair, eyes narrow, voice cold. "She doesn't love this country," he said, a sneer curling his lip. "She hates it. Jasmine Crockett is what happens when activism replaces patriotism." The words hit like a slap. In a modest home in Houston, an elderly woman named Mrs. Viola dropped her tea. It shattered. She had marched in Selma. She had seen blood on bridges. Now she watched the screen, her hand trembling. In a middle school classroom in St. Louis, a teacher named Ms. Carter paused the video she'd planned for her students. She sat still for a moment, heart pounding, knowing tomorrow they'd ask, "Why is she called un-American?" On Twitter, the clip exploded. People cheered. People cursed. Hashtags trended. "Your hates America," "Your Crockett under fire," "In Tucker was right," and "Jasmine Crockett?" She sat in her apartment, the city buzzing below her. The screen in front of her glared with headlines. But she didn't blink. She didn't cry. She whispered one thing to herself before she closed her laptop. They don't know what love is. The next morning, the nation waited. Every news anchor had the same question. Will she respond? Crockett didn't tweet. She didn't post a video. She didn't issue a press release. Instead, she walked through the doors of a quiet community center on the east side. Dozens of kids were waiting. Today was reading day. She sat cross-legged on the floor, holding a book titled "Brave Enough to Change." Her voice was warm, steady. The children leaned in, their eyes wide. They didn't know about the headlines. They just knew that she listened. One little girl raised her hand. "Miss Jasmine," she asked softly, "do people say mean things about you?" Crockett paused. She looked at the girl, then at the room filled with brown faces and bright eyes. "Yes," she said. "Sometimes people are scared of voices that don't sound like theirs, but that doesn't mean we stop speaking." Later that day, a message came in. Live interview offer, prime time, no pre-screening. Crockett accepted. No makeup artist, no pre-written script, just truth. And as night fell, a quiet fire burned in her chest. They wanted her silence. They were about to hear her soul. The studio lights were harsh. The air was tight. Across the nation, millions tuned in. Crockett sat in the chair, calm, centered. The anchor offered a polite smile. "Congresswoman, Tucker Carlson's comments." "I heard them," she said, voice soft. A pause, a breath. "I heard every word," she continued, "and I wasn't surprised." She looked into the camera like she was looking into the eyes of every American. "Let me say something. Loving this country doesn't mean whispering when it hurts you. Loving America means standing in the middle of its silence and saying, 'You must do better.'" She didn't flinch. Not when the host shifted uncomfortably. Not when producers in his earpiece begged for a break. "I challenge America, not because I hate it," she said, "but because I believe in its promise. And I won't let anyone, any man, any network tell me that demanding justice is unpatriotic." Then she leaned forward, eyes steady, voice clear. "If silence is love, then America loved slavery. I refuse that kind of love." Suddenly, the screen cut to black. A commercial, an awkward jingle, and across living rooms, mouths hung open. She wasn't angry. She was honest, and that made them run. It didn't take long. Clips of the cutaway flooded the internet. Not just what Crockett said, but how she said it. No yelling, no theatrics, just one sentence that struck deep. "If silence is love, then America loved slavery. I refuse that kind of love." It was raw, unfiltered, and it scared people. The network offered no comment. Tucker Carlson didn't return to air that night. Rumors swirled, internal panic, calls from sponsors, debates over editorial responsibility. But the people? They knew. Mothers shared it. Veterans reposted it. Teachers printed it. Teens stitched it into TikToks with tears in their eyes. At a barbershop in Atlanta, a father showed it to his son. "She just said what I've been feeling," he whispered. The boy nodded. "She said it for us." And in nursing homes, old hands clutched remote controls like lifelines. "She reminded me," an elderly black man said, "of Baldwin, of Fannie Lou." Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett sat alone in her apartment. No team, no PR spin, just her phone buzzing every second with messages. One stood out. "You made me proud to be American again. Thank you." She wiped her eyes, and finally, she let herself cry. By morning, Tucker Carlson was trending. He appeared via pre-recorded video. No audience, no co-host. Just a tight frame and a tight smile. "Well," he began, "it seems the Congresswoman has opinions." He tried to twist her words. He called her dramatic, dangerous, even divisive. But something had shifted. Viewers noticed his voice shook slightly. At a cafe in Chicago, a woman named Ava slammed her laptop shut. "Enough," she said to her friend. "He's scared because he met a truth he couldn't shout over." Online, a journalist tweeted, "Crockett didn't scream, she didn't insult, she just told the truth. And truth isn't easy to edit." Even conservative voices were uneasy. "She made a point," one admitted on air. "You don't have to agree, but you felt it." But while media spun and spun, Crockett didn't spin with them. She showed up to a community cleanup in Dallas, wearing old sneakers and gloves, picking up trash beside teenagers who now looked at her with reverence. "Why'd you go on TV?" one asked her. She smiled. "Because if we don't tell our truth," she said gently, "someone else will sell us a lie." By the third night, her mailbox overflowed. Letters, hundreds of them, some typed, some scribbled by hand, all of them raw, a Marine from Kentucky. "I wore that uniform for 10 years. What you said, that was brave, braver than I ever was. A high schooler from Oakland. They call me loud. I thought that meant wrong. You made me believe in me again. A grandmother from Mississippi. I remember the dogs, the hoses. I never thought I'd hear someone say it on live TV." Jasmine read each one, every sentence a heartbeat, every envelope a soul reaching out. She didn't sleep much that night. She sat on her couch, letters in her lap, tears streaming down her cheeks, not from pain, from connection. For the first time in days, she whispered to the empty room, "This is what America should feel like." The next morning, she held a press conference outside a church. She didn't attack anyone. She didn't name names. She read a letter from a child, then said, "You can try to cut away my truth, but I promise, you'll never mute the millions who carry it with me." The crowd applauded. The nation listened. In a quiet office at Eastview High, Principal Renee Holmes sat with a folded letter in her hands. It was from a student named Mariah, a shy girl, barely spoke in class. The letter read, "When Ms. Crockett spoke, I saw someone like me, not scared, not small. She made me think maybe I matter." Renee placed the letter beside others, dozens from her students since the interview aired. She hadn't seen this kind of awakening before. In the hallway, students whispered lines from Crockett's speech, not in mockery, in awe. One teacher played the clip during U.S. government class. A boy in the back raised his hand and said, "Why'd they cut her off?" No one had an answer. That afternoon, Renee called Jasmine's office, left a voicemail. "Thank you," she said, voice cracking, "for showing my kids that truth isn't always loud, but it is powerful." Meanwhile, networks scrambled, ratings dipped, viewers questioned. Why silence a voice speaking with such clarity? A political firestorm was brewing, but in a small high school in Texas, something better had already begun. Hope. Real, quiet, growing. And it sounded a lot like Jasmine Crockett. Tucker Carlson wasn't done. He returned to his primetime slot with a vengeance. This time he came armed with footage. Clips of Crockett protesting, shouting at rallies, demanding police accountability. "She's chaos in a dress," he said with a smirk. "She wants to tear down the country, not build it up." It was vicious, intentional, calculated to destroy her image. But something was different now. People weren't just watching. They were questioning. Clips of her calm interview played alongside Carlson's montage. The contrast was jarring. "She didn't yell," one veteran said. "She didn't rage, and yet he's the one foaming." Even Republicans in Congress shifted awkwardly in interviews. "She has a right to her voice," one finally admitted. In her home, Jasmine watched none of it. Instead, she sat with her team, young, diverse, passionate, and said, "We're not fighting Tucker. We're reminding America who we are." They planned community events, town halls, letters to voters, healing work. "Let him yell," Jasmine said softly. "We'll keep building." And somewhere across the city, a woman named Diane, white, conservative, skeptical, watched her son replay Jasmine's words. "I don't agree with everything," she whispered, "but maybe she's not the enemy." The auditorium filled slowly. Folding chairs, homemade signs, no big lights, no cameras, just people. Jasmine Crockett stood in the center, holding nothing but a worn notepad and a steady heart. This wasn't about politics. It was about truth. She began quietly, talked about her upbringing, her mother, the food stamps, the fear, the fire. "I don't hate America," she said. "I survived it." Then she looked into the crowd and said something no one expected. "And I forgive it." Gasps, silence, not because it was soft, but because it was brave. "I forgive the history books that erased me. I forgive the stares, the doubts, the broken promises." She paused. But forgiveness isn't silence. Forgiveness is courage. A man in the back, a former cop, stood and asked, "Even after all this, you still believe in the flag?" She nodded. "I believe in its potential. Not because it's perfect, but because we aren't done writing what it stands for." Applause, not thunderous, but real. That night, the clip of her speech made its way to every corner of the country. Even Tucker's producers watched it. One turned to the other and whispered, "We tried to break her, but she built something instead." The producers called, not to apologize, not to reflect, just to talk. "We'd like you back," they said. "We think it'd be powerful." Jasmine sat quietly, listening to the polished voice on the other end. She knew what this was, damage control dressed as dialogue. She asked one question. "Will you let me finish my sentence this time?" A pause. "I can't guarantee that," the voice replied. She smiled to herself. "Then I won't guarantee my presence." She hung up. No bitterness, no anger, just clarity. They didn't want her truth. They wanted her image. Her fire, contained, marketable, controlled. But she didn't belong to a segment. She belonged to a movement. Elsewhere, Carlson stayed silent. No apology, no retraction. But his viewers began to shrink. The ratings, once towering, were now uncertain. In living rooms across America, families began asking questions. "Mama, why were they scared of what she said?" And the answer, quietly passed down like sacred stories, was always the same. Because the truth she spoke didn't come to be liked. It came to set us free. Jasmine didn't need the apology. She had something better. A voice they couldn't box in. A nation they couldn't unhear. The mail kept coming. But now, something new. Letters from people she never expected. A white farmer in Oklahoma. "I've said things I regret. I never listened until now." You made me look in the mirror. A police officer in Montana. I was taught protest meant hate. You helped me see it can mean love. A teenage girl in Alabama. My dad watches Tucker every night. I watched you once. We talked for the first time in months. Jasmine read everyone. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she smiled. But every time she remembered why she spoke. In one letter, a woman wrote, I didn't agree with you, but you made me feel something I didn't expect. Respect. That word hit her hard, because respect was rarer than applause, and far more powerful than fear. Jasmine pinned that letter to her wall, not because it flattered her, but because it reminded her. People can change, but only if someone is brave enough to speak the first sentence. She didn't expect to change the world, but she had changed one heart at a time. And in today's America, that was no small thing. The auditorium was packed again. This time, it was a youth summit. No press, no politicians, just students. Jasmine sat on stage beside educators and community leaders, but her eyes kept drifting toward the back row. A girl sat there, hoodie up, head down, arms crossed. Something about her reminded Jasmine of herself. Midway through the panel, Jasmine set aside her notes. She stood, walked down the aisle, and gently asked, Can I sit here? The room went quiet. The girl blinked, nervous, nodded. Jasmine turned to the crowd. I was her, she said. Quiet, angry, tired of people talking at me instead of to me. She looked at the girl. You got something to say? A pause, then a whisper. They say we're too loud. Jasmine nodded. I've heard that my whole life. Then, louder now, Jasmine spoke to everyone. You are not too loud. You are not too much. You are just right for a world that forgot how to listen. Applause erupted. The girl smiled. For the first time that day, she sat up. Later, she'd write Jasmine a message. I think I believe in me now, because you believed in me first.
At a memorial in Washington, D.C., Jasmine stood quietly beside a folded flag. It was a tribute to a young soldier, just 22, killed overseas. His mother had requested Jasmine deliver a few words. No cameras, no spotlight, just wind and whispers of grief. She stepped forward. I never met Private Jordan West, she began, voice steady. But I know the courage it takes to love a country that doesn't always love you back. The crowd held its breath. I've been called un-American, she continued. But if fighting for justice is betrayal, then this young man must have betrayed us all, because he believed in something better, and he gave his life for it. She paused, letting the silence speak too. Don't tell me patriotism is quiet. Don't tell me love is silence, because here lies a man who roared with loyalty, and so do I. The mother wept. Jasmine hugged her, and beneath the mother's feet lay the very flag once used to shame Jasmine. But in that moment, it wasn't a weapon. It was a witness to truth, to grief, to love fierce enough to confront its country, and still choose it. The call came unexpectedly. A national network, not the one that cut her off, invited Jasmine for a full hour. No edits, no time cuts, no filters. She hesitated, then agreed. The studio was sleek, the cameras were unforgiving, but her voice, unshaken. I never wanted a spotlight, she began. I wanted a space. She spoke of every story sent to her. She read letters, showed the faces of those who wrote them. Tears fell silently in homes across America. I was called divisive, she said, but silence is what divides us. Truth is what brings us home. Then she turned toward the host. People asked why I kept speaking, why I didn't retreat after being attacked. She smiled. Because a nation isn't broken by voices, it's broken by silence. A long pause.
Then applause, real, raw, uninterrupted. Jasmine stood. I wasn't speaking for anyone. I was speaking with them. And now, they're speaking back. Outside the studio, people waited with signs, tears, and hands over their hearts. And across the world, people didn't just hear her. They finally listened. She stood in front of a mural in her hometown. It wasn't of her. It was of us, the people. Old, young, rich, poor. Faces woven together. Someone had spray-painted her sentence across the top. If silence is love, then America loved slavery. I refuse that kind of love. She read it one more time, then turned to a crowd of young students beside her. One asked, "Miss Jasmine, would you say it again?" She smiled, stepped forward, and with the softest strength, she said, "I said it, so you wouldn't have to whisper anymore." Cheers broke out. In that moment, she wasn't just a congresswoman. She was a mirror, a microphone, a movement. Tucker Carlson never responded again. The country had moved on, not from debate, but toward truth. Jasmine Crockett didn't silence anyone. She freed them. And when the dust settled, one truth stood taller than every headline. She didn't destroy anyone. She reminded us who we were and who we could still become. Now it's your turn. If this story made you cry, if it made you feel seen, if it reminded you that truth still matters, leave a comment, like the video, subscribe, because your voice, it's powerful too, and someone out there needs to hear it.